Welcome and thank you for joining this channel. I hope you enjoy several stories about haunted dolls, accompanied by rain and thunder. There are no ads on this video. If you have any stories you would like me to share on this channel, comment below and your story will be featured in a video. Please help this channel by liking and subscribing. We really appreciate it. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy several creepy encounters with dolls. I got this doll at a yard sale. It caught my eye as I was driving past. It was on a chair with a piece of paper taped to its chest and said, "Haunted. Take it. It's free." I found it funny and asked the owner why she thought it was haunted. She told me she bought it at a thrift store after her daughter was begging for it. As they were driving back home, her daughter gave her the name Violet. The next day, she hears another girl's voice arguing with her daughter in the living room. She went to check and saw the daughter sitting on the couch watching TV with Violet beside her. She asked her who she was talking to, and she said Violet. A week later, while her daughter was at a friend's house, she began hearing a girl's voice coming from her daughter's bedroom. She goes to check and sees Violet sitting in the middle of the room. She grabs Violet, puts her on the bed, and walks out. As she begins walking towards the kitchen, she tells me she saw the magnetized letters on her refrigerator spell out the word "hi." Then a music box in her living room starts to play, and the door to her daughter's room slams shut. She grabbed her keys and left the house in a hurry. She walked outside until her husband came home. When they opened the door, they saw Violet sitting in the living room on a coffee table in front of one of the daughter's coloring books. As the husband takes one step inside, the pages of the book start to flip frantically by itself until it flies across the room. After that, her husband grabbed Violet and threw her in the shed, where it stayed until morning. She looked at me in the eyes and said, "Take it. We don't want it in our lives anymore." I was sold. I was skeptical, but I loved the story, plus it was free. I took it home and placed it right beside my bed on a nightstand. Almost a month went by without experiencing anything, until one night I felt someone sit at the foot of my bed. I turned on the lights, but I didn't see anything. I live alone, with no pets, so I was startled. A couple days later, I was in the kitchen making a sandwich when I hear a disembodied girl's voice whisper, "Hi," right over my shoulder. I ran towards the corner of the living room, grabbing my chest because it felt like my heart was going to explode. Later that night, as I was laying on my couch, I hear giggling coming from my bedroom. I get up, walk inside, and see Violet sitting on my bed. I was creeped out. I always kept her on my nightstand, and she was. She was sitting on my bed. At this point, I started to believe the woman's story, so I bought an EMF detector. I've seen them being used in ghost shows before, so I thought I'd give it a try. I put it near Violet and got a constant high reading from her. I was intrigued, so I bought a spirit box in an attempt to try to continue to communicate with her. After 2 weeks of nothing but static from the spirit box, I finally got a high followed by, "Get the thing." I was excited, so I went back to the previous owner. I told her about my experiences and investigation on Violet. I asked if there's anything the doll might have been attached to. She told me that it was probably the music box. It always went off when she was near. I asked her if she still had it, and she gave it to me. After about a week of on and off spirit box sessions, I finally got a girl's laugh, followed by something that sent a chill down my spine. A man's voice that said, "Devil." Immediately, I thought of the theory of demons disguising themselves as little girls in order to get you in a vulnerable state. I didn't want to take the chance, so I grabbed the doll and threw it inside into my backyard. It landed face first. The next morning, I decided to take the doll and put it in the storage unit. I opened the back door and see it sitting down a few feet closer to where it landed, staring right at me. I grabbed it and put it in storage. Now it's been about 2 weeks, and the activity has stopped, but I haven't been able to stop thinking about Violet. I have this urge to open the storage room, close the door behind me, and do another spirit box session. but my gut tells me not to do it because I may be messing with something evil and I don't want to risk having an attachment. So for now, I'll go with my gut feeling and leave her in there. This is my story about my haunted doll, Claire. She's been featured in the books Haunted Objects and Stories of Ghosts on Your Shelves, on a couple of paranormal podcasts, and the TV show Haunted Towns that aired on Destination America back in 2017. You can still catch reruns of the show on Travel Channel every now and then. She was in the season finale featuring McDung. So here's my story. As an 8-year-old child, I was given an old porcelain doll by a very dear family friend, Miss Marin. She was all the time coming over across things and giving them to me. This doll was the last thing she gave me. I was never really into dolls at all growing up, but I took the doll and replaced her in my room in a small child-sized rocking chair. The chair sat next to my closet and dresser, right beside my nightlight. The doll was very pretty. She was dressed in a peach and cream colored dress with an apron and petticoats. She had little black Mary Jane shoes that, when removed, show her delicately painted toenails. Her body was soft. Only her head, forearms, hands, and legs from the knee down were porcelain. Her lips were pink, and her dark brown hair hung in slightly frizzed and now loose curls. Her eyes were brown. Her cheeks were a rosy peach color, all like mine. Miss Marin made a point of saying the doll reminded her of me, which is why she gave her to me. From the moment that doll, I named her Claire, came into my house, things began to happen. I was always uneasy with Claire. I never wanted to touch her, and when I played in my room, it was just me. And it seemed like as she was watching me. It wasn't anything to panic about, but I do remember feeling like if I did anything wrong, she might actually tell me. How ridiculous that sounds. I know. The first real occurrence I remember was when I was reading in my room. Ghost stories, if you can believe that. When a musical carousel horse that sat on my dresser began to play. Not just a couple of notes, like old mechanical music boxes will do at times, but like someone just wound it up fully. I sat stunned and stared at the little horse, and it moved up and down in time with the music. Then it just stopped. Not wound down, but just suddenly stopped. I was a pretty brave kid. I didn't run and I didn't tell my mom. I used to see a shadow man in the hallway or in my parents' bedroom door all of my years growing up. And if she didn't believe me about that, she wouldn't believe me about something as mundane as a music box playing on its own. So I just let it go. The next thing that happened was the voice. For several nights and on into these years, I was awoken by what sounded like a woman inches from my face shouting my name. Jill, wake up. I jump and sit up to find my room empty. Those happenings died down after a few months. She then started to plague my little brother with the same thing, and now that me and him are all grown up and gone, she moved on to my dad. The little things started to get to me. I'd put something in a certain place only to find it later on the floor or on my dresser or right by Claire. All my missing things eventually turned up around her. Once a ring ended up in the pocket of her apron. Books would fall off my shelves, and a perfume smell would sometimes fill my room. The doll itself didn't smell at all, but the air around her would. My catalyst to finally get Claire out of my room was the night I woke up after hearing thumping around near my closet. I opened my eyes, sat up in my bed, and of course my eyes were drawn to the nightlight, where Claire sat. As I watched, the source of thumping became clear, the rocking chair. Claire accompanied was rocking on its own. Add thick shag carpet. So there's no way it was rocking just by chance. If that wasn't enough, Claire's feet, which were both turned to the side facing opposite each other, slowly strained themselves to both be pointing directly up. This part still freaks me out 20 years later. She then turned her head, which was quite impossible to do since it was attached, fixed to her cloth body. She looked towards me, and every music box in my room, all 4 of them, started to play at once. I was frozen with fear. I didn't feel endangered so much as I felt just scared of what was happening. I screamed for my mom and dad. The music stopped, but Claire maintained her gaze in my direction. And this is why I hate dolls. Even after that, I couldn't get rid of Claire totally. I ended up stuffing her in a box in the back of the storage closet. She's still there, as far as I know, so... Is the woman who now screams my dad's name in the middle of the night, and not in a kinky way. While I think she explains some of the oddities that happened in my parents' house, I don't think she ties to it all, especially the Shadow Man. My friend Tim is a paranormal radio podcast host of the show Spooky South Coast, and also an author. He asked me to lend him Claire once he heard my story back in 2011. I obliged, and Claire went to stay with him for a few months. He wrote about his experiences with Claire while she stayed with him in the book Haunted Objects that I mentioned earlier. Temperature changes in the room she stayed in, along with hearing voices, were 2 of his notes encounters. Claire also stayed briefly at the Lizzie Borden bed and breakfast in 2012. The guys from the Haunted Towns show encountered some things in my parents' house while Claire was with them. She now lives at my friend's old haunted house. He's a Hongon, so he and his Lo, along with the house's other spirits, tend to keep her in line. Once upon a time, there was a small village in the middle of the dense forest. The villagers lived simple lives, but they always had an eerie feeling that they were being watched. They would often hear strange noises in the night and see shadows moving in the trees. One night, a group of villagers decided to investigate the source of the strange occurrences. They ventured deep into the forest and came upon an old abandoned house. As they approached the house, they could see that the windows were boarded up and the door was locked. They forced open the door and found themselves in a dimly lit room. The room was filled with dolls, hundreds of them, all lined up on shelves that covered the walls. The dolls were all different sizes and styles, but they all had one thing in common. They all had the same face. The face of a little girl with long black hair and cold, empty eyes. The villagers were horrified and quickly left the house, but as they were leaving, they heard a voice coming from the dolls. It was a soft, childlike voice that whispered, "Come back and play with me." The villagers never returned to that house again, and to this day, no one knows who the dolls belong to or what their purpose is. But if you ever find yourself in that forest, you should be careful not to wander too far into the trees. You never know what kind of secrets they might hold. My daughter has a doll that was battery operated. It would clap and sing when it heard a loud clap. Also had a motion sensor. The batteries died, so we put it on the shelf in the dining room. Days passed and we never put in new batteries. The shelf is too high for the children to reach, and even if they could, they didn't know how to change batteries. Anyways, middle of the day, No one is near the doll. It started singing and clapping, only for a few seconds. Weird, but it stopped. Then randomly, at nighttime, you just doze off, and this bitch would sing loudly and scare you awake. But not funny. So I investigated the doll and get nothing. I clapped loudly and it didn't censor, didn't do anything. It didn't even activate. I waved my hands for the motion sensor and nothing. I put it back on the shelf and walked back to my room. The damn thing goes off again. What the fuck, I think to myself. I take the doll and throw it outside in the trash and go back to sleep. Next day, the doll is on the couch in the living room. The kids are 3 years old and 4. I know they couldn't have gotten the doll out the big trash bin. There's no one else who could have gotten it. As I approached the doll, it started singing and clapping again. I freaked out and asked the kids anyway. They say no. So I turn on my fireplace and throw the doll in. I burn it. Then my daughter brings me a pink teddy bear, tells me he is not her friend anymore, and throws him into the fire too. The black smoke that rolled up the walls and into my house was crazy. Had to open the windows. Evil doll gone. Unfriendly pink bear gone too. My daughter still talks about that doll to ask me why I burned it. I just told her it was haunted. Just to clarify, I'm not an adult. I'm still in school, so this wasn't an old story. I was cleaning out my closet in my room today and had found a small voodoo doll looking thing about the size of my pinky, made out of cloth and wood. Had a normal looking face stitched on it, not super creepy until I remembered where it was last. It was in a small trinket box about the size of my hand, and the doll was in the box when I was in 4th grade. The box used to smell like rotting fucking flesh. And 4th grade me didn't realize how weird and odd that is and kept bringing it on the bus showing kids. And after that, it had been in my room ever since I was in elementary school. A while back, I do not remember how small the doll got out of the box, or even in the box, and I buried it in my closet. I don't think I want to know, but discovering it years after it's been sitting in my room, I'm totally freaked out. I told my father about how it was in the trinket box and smelled like rotting flesh, and he advised that I bring it out into the woods on our property and put it somewhere and say I'm done and leave. No ritual. It's obviously not haunted, just definitely has some negative energy attached to it. But I'm just getting the heebie-jeebies just having the doll sitting in my room. This is a true story, and I still live with the dolls. The dolls are in a case on the far east wall of my bedroom. They have been there since I was little and have always freaked me out. Truly, my entire bedroom freaks me out in general. My house is not haunted, it's just the fucking dolls. My house is only 20 years old and my family built it, actually. My parents were the first ones to move in, so no recent owner or that haunts it or any kind of weird stuff like that. There are about 20 to 25 dolls in the case, and there is one doll that freaks me out the most. The case is rectangle shaped. There are 3 shelves, and in the top right corner of the 3rd shelf is the doll. You can walk around it while looking as if its eyes are looking directly at you and following your every move. And if you turn your back to it, you feel as if you're being watched. None of my friends or some of my really close family like sleeping in my bed because the dolls are right by my bed. And the doll that I don't like is positioned in the case as if watching you sleep. It's really fucking creepy. I'm still really young and I still live with my parents. My parents don't believe in ghosts. My family has told me that they have felt something touch them. They have heard things before and have sharp pains in the lower back. And so have I. I truly think that my room is haunted because of these reasons. So that's my paranormal story. Basically, my mom has a creepy doll and it's haunted, but she doesn't believe me. She's had this doll since she was a kid, but I have hated it since I was a kid, and so did my brother. It's not even that my mom doesn't believe in the paranormal and the house we live in itself is haunted. But this post isn't about my haunted house, it's about the creepy fucking doll. So a few stories to kind of explain how I know it's haunted. I had this doll in my room from when I was a baby until I was about 7, and I hated this doll to the point where I would always turn her head in the opposite direction and have my other dolls watch her. I feel like it's also important to know that growing up, my bed would always shake, like violently. Literally felt like someone took both of their hands and was shaking the bed frame as hard as they could. And like all little girls, I told my parents, who didn't believe me until one night. I was like, no, you lay on the bed until I fall asleep so it doesn't shake. My mom laid on the bed and the bed started shaking and she freaked out. And I was just kind of like, yeah, that's what I've been telling you for years. But back to the doll. So one night when I was 7 and I was trying to go to sleep with the bed violently shaking, the creepy doll turned its head around and started crawling towards me. I started screaming and the doll started laughing until my dad ran in and was upset I was screaming because he had to get up for work at 3 a.m. Doll stopped staying in my room that night and started staying in my parents' room. A few years later, other creepy shit started happening. I'm coming home from school in 6th grade and I walk into my living room and the doll is sitting on the couch with the TV remote next to her in her right hand, staring at me as Dr. Phil is playing on TV. My uncle, my mom's brother, lived with us at the time and he ran upstairs to see what I was screaming about and was confused to see the creepy doll staring at us while Dr. Phil was on. Him and I were the only ones home. My mom left for work before I left for school, so I knew it wasn't her. And when I asked my uncle to move the doll, he wouldn't touch it. He told my mom about it and she thought I was joking with her, but honestly, no 6th grader is creative enough to think of this shit. And now comes this latest story. As I'm home for the summer from college and as I'm walking with the dogs to bring them to my mom's room, I see the doll on my mom's nightstand. So I ask her why the doll is there, and she thinks I'm playing a joke. Now mind you, a couple different events that happened in between the doll watching Dr. Phil and now. So I'm asking her if she's playing a joke on me because she thinks me thinking I'm crazy is funny. So she thinks that I, at some point today, when both of us were home, went up to her room and moved the doll and apparently put on the Fox News for the doll. Honestly, I don't know what to do. I've begged for years for my mom to get rid of the fucking doll, and I've tried throwing the doll out of our room, out of the house, but the doll keeps coming back. This is all true. You can say I'm lying if you want, but to be honest, who the fuck would make up a doll watching Dr. Phil and the Fox News? Like this doll of a now 50-something-year-old woman, not me, my mom. So, like, that checks out on me, or checks out to me. I don't know. But yeah, I just don't know what to do at this point. Last night, while I was trying to go to sleep, my door opened and what I thought was my mom stood in my doorway and said, "The doll is moving towards you." And it was the same voice that whispered in my ear when I came home this summer from college. That time said, "Let's have a sleepover." To which I just started screaming out no, and then saying, "We're not doing this shit. You're not welcome." So I got up and started chasing what I thought was my mom, screaming, "What do you mean?" like 3 times before I got to my mom's door and opened it and saw my mom peacefully sleeping in bed with her face mask on. At this point, still didn't realize, hey, that probably wasn't your mother until I closed her door and looked at my dog, trying to register if all of this generally happened before going back to my room and locking the door. This morning I woke up and I immediately told my mom she needs to get rid of the fucking doll and what happened, and she claims that she didn't believe me, but that she threw the doll in the garbage apparently. Moral of the story, I would definitely be a white bitch who dies in the movie from chasing after a fucking demon.